Tonight, protests continue to pop up in Iowa City. And Kim Reynolds hosts her yearly Harvest Fest.
The fight for a new House Speaker continues in D.C.
Good evening and welcome to DITV's The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we've got you covered to keep you up to date.
I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar.
And we're going to keep it local here. Jordan, since Monday, going back to last Monday, there have been 3 separate protests here in Iowa City.
Yes, Johnny, and while things have been relatively quiet on the local government policy front, Iowa City saw 3 separate protests this week. Issues for these range from a controversial speaker invited by the Young Americans for Freedom, the conflict between Israel and Palestine, and changes in housing zoning. On Monday, the University of Iowa chapter of the Young Americans for Freedom hosted Speaker Chloe Cole at the Iowa Memorial Union. Cole, a detransitioner, spoke about her experiences with gender transitioning and why she's against it now. This drew the ire of students on campus as they organized a protest against Cole and gave their thoughts on why she's dangerous for the rights of transgender people, while also expressing messages of support for transgender people.
We love people who are trans, we love people who detransition, but we should not remove all gender-affirming health care because it hurts trans people. And all people. We need that health care. We shouldn't ban it just because somebody had a bad experience with it.
And on the day prior, Iowa City residents gathered on the Penncrest to voice their support for Palestine and protest the U.S. government's involvement with Israel. This, of course, comes after the Hamas attack on Israel and subsequent retaliation from Israel. Protesters would give their thoughts on the matters of freeing Palestine and the killing of Palestinian citizens.
It's time for us to stand up for human rights for all.
Our land, our water, our borders, that's what freedom is all about, and that's what we are asking for. We're not asking for much.
And then on Tuesday, residents went to City Hall to protest in favor of housing zoning changes, which would make affordable housing part of it. The proposed changes include ease of restrictions on accessory apartments, regulatory incentives on affordable housing, and addressing fair housing concerns.
As refugees, we would like the opportunity to find an accessible place to live that's dignified as well, near the city.
It will help like Iowa City to decrease the price of rent.
Yes, Jordan, and I've covered 2 of those protests, and I covered the Matt Walsh protest last year, and it's been interesting to see, just as time is going on, we're seeing a lot more protests.
Yeah, and it seems to be on the rise with every day. But for now, things have cooled down in Iowa City, and there's no word of any more protests for the rest of this week.
All right, and now we're going to take it out to Cara, and she has more on Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. She recently hosted a fundraiser, and Senator Chuck Grassley will soon be making his way around eastern Iowa as I send it out to Cara.
Thanks, Johnny. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds hosted her annual Harvest Fest fundraiser over the weekend, where she celebrated recent legislative wins for Iowa conservatives. One of the things she highlighted was her bill banning transgender women from competing in women's and girls' sports across the state, which she signed into law in March. The event's featured guest, Riley Gaines, spoke on that as well. Gaines is a former competitive swimmer turned anti-transgender activist. During her speech, Gaines denounced transgender women's participation in women's sports, labeling transgender identities as a battle of spiritual warfare. Reynolds also signed into law this year measures that prohibit Iowa doctors from providing gender-affirming care to minors, including hormone therapy. Her laws also come into play in Iowa classrooms, restricting school bathroom use by individuals' sex assigned at birth and prohibiting any instruction about gender identity before 7th grade. And Senator Chuck Grassley is holding traveling office hours in 18 Iowa counties between October 23rd and November 3rd. He'll kick off in Franklin, Floyd, and Butler counties on the 23rd and continue making his way through eastern Iowa before ending his trip with Clay County and Dickinson County. He says Iowans seeking assistance regarding a personal issue with a federal agency or wishing to share views on matters of federal policy are encouraged to stop by during these office hours. Now I'll send it on back to Johnny.
Thanks, Cara. Meanwhile, in Washington, the race for the Speaker of the House continues. Jayce is in the newsroom, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about what's going down in the Capitol without a Speaker.
Well, Johnny, last week the Republicans expected to have their nominee when a majority of the conference voted for Representative Steve Scalise, but he dropped out of the running only a few hours later after it became clear he wouldn't have enough votes to win the seat. Republicans then turned to runner-up Jim Jordan, though several key representatives are staunchly against his nomination. This was made clear on Tuesday when 20 Republicans refused to vote for Jordan, resulting in his first failed ballot towards the position. On Wednesday, he lost a second time, garnering less votes than on Tuesday. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party is standing firmly behind House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries as their pick, but their 212 votes is not enough for him to win the seat. Both nominees fell just short of the 217 vote majority, though Jordan has the much harder battle of winning back those 20 votes against him. This comes as the Israeli-Hamas war continues in the Gaza Strip. On Tuesday, a hospital was bombed in Gaza City, leaving at least 500, many women and children, dead. Hamas accused the Israeli Defense Force of the bombing, while the IDF claims a failed rocket sent by Hamas caused the explosion. The IDF has also been accused of using white phosphorus on the Gaza Strip. White phosphorus has been designated as a weapon of mass destruction, and Iraq's supposed holding of the arms was a key justification in George W. Bush's 2004 invasion of the country. If the IDF is responsible for the hospital bombing, and if the white phosphorus claims are true, then Israel would be culpable for war crimes. However, President Biden is standing firm in his support for Israel, vowing to stand behind America's ally 100%.
The fact is that Israel, as they respond to these attacks, it seems to me that have to continue to ensure that you have what you need to defend yourselves. And we're going to make sure that occurs, as you know.
Biden visited several allies in the Middle East on Wednesday, including Israel, as well as meeting with Palestinian, Egyptian, and Jordanian leaders. However, the House of Representatives, which is the body in charge of providing funds and aid to Israel, is currently deadlocked because of the speaker race, so there's not much aid that can currently go to Israel. I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan.
Thanks, Jayce. Now, between Christina Bohannon's profile last week and the candidate profile this week, I'm starting to get some flashbacks to last year's election.
Yes, and I mean, this is going to be a rematch coming up in 24, as we're going to take a look at Christina Bohannon's opponent this week on candidate profile. Republican Representative Marionette Miller Meeks currently serves Iowa's 2nd District in Washington, D.C. She enlisted in the Army at 18, where she would serve for 24 years as a private nurse and doctor. Following her service, she operated her own ophthalmology practice and became the first woman faculty member on the University of Iowa's Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences. Her political career began in 2008, running for Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. She would also run for that position in 2010, but would lose both elections to Dave Loebsack. Governor Terry Branstad would then appoint her to the Director of Iowa Public Health in 2010, and she would hold that position until 2014. Then she came back out and faced Loebsack again, and the third time was not the charm, as she would also lose the 2014 race. But when Loebsack retired, Miller Meeks ran again in 2020 and beat out Rita Hart by a slim 4-vote margin to win the 2nd Congressional District. She won her re-election against Bohannon in 2022. In her 3 years, Miller Meeks has focused in on Iowa's infrastructure, cracking down on illegal immigration, protecting rights for the LGBTQ+ community, and focused on antitrust legislations. Now Miller Meeks and Bohannon will have a rematch again in the 2024 race. And Jordan, in this past week, we haven't really seen that many presidential candidates around here in Iowa.
Yeah, you know, Johnny, it seemed weirdly dry considering we've got a primary coming up in January. We're going to send it out to Cara, who's going to give us some updates on where the presidential candidates have been in the state of Iowa and who's been missing out.
Thanks, Jordan. And only 3 presidential candidates have visited the state in the last week. A lot of attention is going to New Hampshire, which is another early caucus state for Republicans, as Nikki Haley and Mike Pence signed onto their ballot earlier this week. Friday, Tim Scott stopped in Cedar Rapids to meet his voters. Scott 2 days ago took a major blow to his campaign after his super PAC canceled his TV ads that cost the campaign $40 million. On Sunday, Ron DeSantis continued what he's calling a full Grassley as he continues toward his goal of visiting all 99 Iowa counties. He stopped in Creston to make some remarks about whether the U.S. should accept refugees.
If you look at how they behave, not all of them are Hamas, but they are all anti-Semitic. None of them believe in Israel's right to exist.
Donald Trump stopped in Clive on Monday and had an interesting perspective on what he would do to make it back to the White House.
I am willing to go to jail if that's what it takes for our country to win and become a democracy again.
Trump was given a gag order Monday in his federal election case. The order prevents the former president from targeting prosecutors, witnesses, and judges in the case. A second poll done by Iowa State University shows that DeSantis and Nikki Haley are gaining ground on Donald Trump among likely caucus voters. Vivek Ramaswamy has dropped support as he lost 4% of previous pollers who had him as their first choice. Candidates are planning to make their way back to the state soon, and we'll be covering some of these visits next week. Jordan and Johnny, I'm going to send it on back to you.
Thank you, Cara and Jordan. We have been seeing a lot of misinformation being spread, especially with the Israel and Palestine conflict. Of course, there's always fake news rolling around in the political world.
Yeah, and with situations as delicate as that, it's important that people have the right information so that they avoid bias.
Yes, and that's why we have Jayce. He's going to rejoin us in the newsroom, and he picked out 3 pieces of false information, and he's going to break it down why it is false.
Thanks, Johnny. I want to start by circling back to that hospital bombing in the Gaza Strip. While there was indeed an explosion at the facility and many innocent lives were lost, the claims that the building were leveled are untrue. The hospital is damaged but is still standing, despite claims by international media companies that the building was leveled. Hamas and the Israeli Defense Force also made these claims, and this is a unique case where groups eager to not take the blame for a tragedy have misconstrued the facts to smear the other side. Next, I want to talk about a claim that the BBC reported Hamas had been receiving arms from Ukraine. This is false, as Ukraine has expressed solidarity with Israel, and the supposed video of BBC reporting this news has proven to be fabricated. And so far, luckily, that is the most fake news I've found, so I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan.
Thank you, Jayce and Jordan. I've heard you've got something you want the audience to consider, and what do you have for us?
Unless you've been completely disconnected from the world these past couple weeks, you've definitely heard about what's going on over in Israel and Palestine. It seems to me that early in this, most of the Western media has taken a pro-Israel stance, making them out to be the victim in this whole situation. Now, I'm not saying what Hamas was and is still doing is right at all, because there's been some very wrong things done by them. But I'd invite you to also look into some of the things that Israel has been doing in retaliation of them that wouldn't exactly make them out to be the golden child in this situation. For example, Israel gave an escape route out of Gaza for civilians. Seems good, right? Israel proceeded to also blow up that same trail with innocents still traveling on it. And according to the Human Rights Watch, they've also been caught recently using white phosphorus, a gas that can cause severe burns to people. And when used in high-density areas like Gaza, this is a violation of international law. Now, this is a messy situation, and neither side are in the right for killing civilians.
Yes, Jordan, and hopefully, these two sides, they can eventually come together and solve their differences. Thank you for tuning in to the update tonight, where you'll find all your news and politics.
Tune in next week for more updates from the local level to the nationwide level.
From the update, I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Have a wonderful day.